So with what Doctor Stone Season 3 Episode 6 just dropped on us, I would personally argue this is the most important episode of Doctor Stone, since really it was portrayed that Senku could return to a modern civilization early into Season 1. When we saw what he was able to create essentially from nothing, it really showed us back then that, honestly, it's more than just a pipe dream. Like, this boy probably could bring science in the modern age back to a stone world, right? But I would say with what they dropped on us with this treasure box, the fact that he's talking about if he gets to this box, that potentially they'll have the ability to revive the entire world. It seems foolish to think about, but the idea that if they collect the revival fluid day in, day out, they'll never have enough to revive the whole world in one lifetime. But the idea of getting platinum, a single piece of that, if that is in the treasure box, the fact that they can make something that could basically make an unlimited amount of it, honestly, it's hard not to say this is one of the most important Dr. Stone episodes. And the whole idea of how it just really cements just how well thought out this show is. The idea that we're continuing to look at the brilliance of Senku's father and really just say like father, like son. The idea of the village, all of the villagers being named almost after rocks and things like that. The fact that you have this box full of goodies that a scientist with a brilliant mind, whether it's his son or not, would be able to make use of it, and who knows where we go from here. This really does feel like one of the most important Dr. Stone episodes, and continues to flex why Senku is one of the greatest anime characters ever written. Full live reaction to this episode is available on my Patreon if you do want to see my full uncut thoughts. I love this show. I think it's pretty obvious given that I've been covering this since Season 1, Episode 1, and I've been loving it ever since. And I continuously see people who watch the show with me say it's one of their favorite, if not their favorite anime. I see people say Senku, one of their favorite anime characters, just like myself, and it's hard not to agree because, seriously, like, this show is written in such a way that it's so clever with how it explains how things can come to be from essentially nothing using modern ideas in a world without technology. But the idea that we have an episode set on a ship, the entire episode is them talking about the past, having some flashbacks of conversations that have occurred, like the 100 stories and everything. Yet it feels just as exciting as any of the battles or inventions that have been made throughout the journey over these dozens and dozens of episodes. I love the fact that the idea of a treasure box, the idea of like the holy grail of objects, what could actually be on that island that could be worth this trip, that could essentially give them everything they're after, and the way they just casually talk about platinum, things that are so rare and just they'll probably never be able to find it themselves, but if it was stored on that ship, of course it makes sense. As you also casually have a character, I was like, oh man, this character looks shady as hell, turns out was actually washed ashore and comes from said treasure island. And the whole emotional appeal of basically having to hide your true name because, well, if everyone's named after rocks and you're obviously not, you definitely feel out of place. And then by the end of the episode, him realizing that he was always a part of the kingdom of science, he just never realized it. I love the fact that it plays on your heartstrings while also progressing things in this scientific way that just continues to flex why Dr. Stone, it is honestly, it should be a crime in every country to not have this on your seasonal watch list anytime it airs, because it truly is next level. The only real negative I have about this episode, and it's the most minor nitpick ever, but I honestly like how Dr. Stone looks in any given scene. Though the intro shot was a little wonky, I wasn't a fan of the 3D boat, the way they were like really focusing on it. Personally for me, I think if they need to go that 3D, I mean, personally I would have preferred maybe like a bird's eye view of showing the ocean and maybe the island and then just focusing on the interior of the ship, because there were shots in this episode that were hand-drawn, static shots obviously, but they were like kind of detailed shots showing them on like the front of the ship or all the different shots, and there was even some 3D shots that were a little cleaner, but personally for me that intro shot was just a little janky. I understand why they went that because of how large the boat is, but personally I think if the option is showing a complete shot of the ship or showing maybe just part of the ship or focusing on the interior, I would prefer that than the full 3D shot, just because it is a little distracting. It's not that highly detailed. It's basically like it kind of felt like an unfinished 3D render model in Blender or something. It's not the biggest deal, but I don't criticize the production all that much, so when something does, if I find something distracting, it'd be unfair for me not to bring it up because usually I like how the show looks, right? But in general, I do think they're working with what they have quite well. Like when the storm hits and you see everyone rushing around, very good directing overall, and I love the fact that they had this almost video game menu system going on when they were exploring the ship. Anyone who's played Fallout Shelter, it's a mobile game, I think it's on consoles now as well. Basically, anyone who's played Fallout, you know, there's bunkers and these little vaults and things. And basically, it's a game where you kind of like, you build rooms, you extend it, sometimes raiders come, and it's just like a little sim game, and it's honestly quite fun in my opinion. The design that they did for showing the individual rooms, especially when they pull away in the wide shot, it just reminded me of Fallout Shelter, and whether it's the Minecraft aesthetic they go with, whether it's the mobile game aesthetic sometimes, I like the fact that they have fun with their visual style, and while it may not be the crispest show of the season with the highest Sakuga production value, I think Dr. Stone overall knows what it's doing with its production, and I really find it has a charm and identity that really sets itself apart from the crowd. And that's why, like, if I do have something that bothers me, is like maybe the intro with the ship being 3D, I'm obviously going to point it out, but does it ruin an episode for me? Of course not. I'm not going to be that picky, right? But at the end of the day, this episode's all about really showing the brilliance of both Senku's father and how he built that civilization, passing down the knowledge, and leaving something for the next generation to hopefully use, and then they can continuously pass it down. Though, of course, there is the fear that there's probably people still on that island, and they very well could be hostile. We don't know. But Senku freaking out in the way he did definitely shows us that we can use it to our advantage to sneak up on them and get the jump if they are going to go that way. Magma, of course, wanting to kill anyone who gets in their way, of course, reminds us like, oh my god, he could have actually been village leader forever. And what type of show would we have experienced when he went up against Tsukasa? Like, they would have been absolutely annihilated. But I like how you have to be very cautious with the idea of reviving the whole world, right? So they have this carrot on the stick right now that's driving them towards the island. If they get this item, they get this piece of mineral, we get some platinum, some other items, we can build something that in theory could get enough revival juice. But as it's brought up, you know, 150 people for a civilization before things get too extreme and things start crumbling. But the idea of being able to revive everyone, there's no longer picking and choosing of who gets to come back. So now you start seeing, okay, we have the Kingdom of Science, and then we start branching out. We build more cities that have 150, and we keep building and building and building. If there's no limit, we can keep going at a steady pace, and even if Senku were to eventually die before the whole world is revived, which would be the likely bet in my opinion, because even if you do naturally progress outwards, I mean, it's hard to imagine him doing the whole world in his lifetime, but if he has the machinery there and the legacy to kind of continue, you see how the whole world can actually come back, and it's honestly brilliant how we start the show off thousands of years in the future, going back to essentially nothing, and him building a shack with some basic technology, and we think, damn bro, like he's actually pretty intelligent, he's gonna really turn this world into a new direction. We're now halfway through the first core of its third season, and the possibility of bringing everyone back is no longer a pipe dream, it actually feels like reality, and that's insane to think about. Even if they don't find what they're looking for on the island, it feels like someday we will find what we need, and that's just, it's so brilliant. That's the wonder and magic of Dr. Stone. Of course, those are just my feelings. Let me know what you're thinking of this episode of Dr. Stone down below. Drop a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here, of course ring that bell so you can get notified when I upload on the channel, and like I mentioned, we do have a full live reaction available on my Patreon if you're interested, and while you're there, you can also get a video shout out. So today, we have Lezik Sykes, Benjamin Margolis, and Coconut Gang, so I appreciate the support everyone. Please take care and have a good one.